Further debate. Member from Guelph.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise for third reading of Bill 116, Foundations of Promoting and Protecting Mental Health and Addictions Act 2019. Speaker, I want to make the case that mental health is health, and it should be treated as such. And that's why I'll support the establishment of a Mental Health and Addiction Centre for Excellence, because we must integrate mental health with our broader healthcare system. Right now, thousands of Ontarians are caught between long wait times for publicly funded therapists and the high cost to access private therapists. Children especially face long wait times, 18 months or longer, to access mental health service. So I hope this centre can break down some of the silos that people are experiencing in the mental health services sector. But to do this, Speaker, we must make sure this centre is not just symbolic. For real action to happen, this centre needs to be backed with proper funding for mental health and addictions. Lack of funding for mental health services puts pressure on and increases costs for our justice system, social services, and health care. And I will repeat my concerns that funding for mental health was actually reduced this year compared to the 2018 budget by $335 million. So if we want to tackle the mental health crisis, we must properly fund mental health services now, not stretching it over the next 10 years. And so that's why, although I'll be voting for Bill 116, I continue to call on the government to increase investments in mental health and addiction services. I also support pursuing strong action and legal action, in particular against opioid manufacturers. But let's not forget that right now there are caps on supervised consumption sites in Ontario. I'm thankful that my community in Guelph, the Community Health Centre, is operating a consumption and treatment services site that saves lives. So I ask the government to not only take legal action against opioid manufacturers, but also lift the caps on harm reduction sites so that people's lives and communities across Ontario can be saved. We've seen a 70% increase in opioid-related deaths between 2016 and 2018. Speaker, we have a public health emergency, and the government needs to declare it and act accordingly. Speaker, I want to mention that I was inspired by a young constituent in my riding by the name of Noah Irvine, who lost both his parents to the mental health crisis. He's been advocating for a Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions. And as a matter of fact, I want to thank the member from Nickel Belt who hosted him in a news conference right here at Queen's Park to share his story. And I do want to acknowledge that the government has put forward an associate minister. These steps are important because there is broad recognition that the current mental health system is fragmented and difficult to navigate. It leaves people in emergency rooms and on waiting lists rather than getting the timely access to care they need. And there are solutions available to us, Speaker. In 2010, the Select Committee on Mental Health and Addictions released their final report with 23 recommendations. In fact, the province has conducted at least 16 reports on reforming mental health care since 1983. It's my hope that we can begin moving forward on these recommendations because for far too long they've been collecting dust somewhere on a shelf. There are recommendations in the report that don't even cost that much money, such as reforming privacy laws and improving the legislation on involuntary treatment. Other recommendations from the Select community include better supports that will help our judicial system. For example, the government could be creating more 24/7 mobile crisis intervention teams, increasing the availability of court mental health workers, providing core services to the incarcerated population, and better supports for people being discharged. As the former police chief in Guelph, Jeff DeRuyter, said, we cannot arrest our way out of the mental health and addictions crisis. In fact, I would like to see the government develop a complete and comprehensive and well-funded strategy for mental health and addictions. One that includes sufficient and sustainable funding for mental health and addiction services, changes to the system to better protect the most vulnerable, a real effort to confront the opioid crisis, improvements to access to culturally appropriate services and removing systemic barriers to services, investments in supportive social and affordable housing, investments in combating poverty and not changing the definition to access ODSP moving forward, and a focus on care and supports for Indigenous nations. So, Speaker, in closing, I hope all members of this House can work together to ensure that we have a proper system that is well funded to provide people with access to the treatment and support they need, because mental health is health.
Thank you very much. Further debate?